Hello, I'm Scott Soshnick.
And I'm Eben Novi-Williams, and this is the Just Don't Do It sports business podcast, the Sporticast.
We were of similar minds, but mine's better. If I'm going to say it to you. Let's reverse the opening of the show.
Great.
And let's try it that way, okay? Go ahead. You
starting
try.
In 3, 2, 1. Hello, I'm Eben Novi-Williams.
And I'm Scott Soshnick, and this is the Goodbye World Sporticast.
Also
you like
good.
it better. You like it better.
Well,
Be honest.
You have to explain yours a little bit more than.
Well,
than
of course we're going to explain it a little more. Thank you for listening, and that's the end of the show. The shortest podcast we've ever done. We just do the intro. But come on the merits, even up. Which one are you voting for?
I like mine.
You liar.
Go with mine.
You liar. You're such a liar. All right, so now explain yours, which is try to literal, I'm a little tired of just do it. That's all.
We're recording on Monday afternoon, so the college football playoff game that has already happened by the time you're listening to this. We don't know who won. We know it was a team that'll be in the Big Ten in a couple of years, but we're going to talk about some other topics instead. The big one being news on Monday morning, Scott, which you and I just both alluded to, Tiger Woods and Nike separating after almost 30 years in business together. One of the most indelible, one of the most lucrative, one of the most notable athlete and brand partnerships, certainly of my lifetime and of the past 30 or 40 years. Just Do It obviously being Nike's slogan. But your allusion, Goodbye World, refers to back in 1996, 97, whenever it was that Tiger signed his first deal. It was a 5-year, $40 million deal. How quaint, his first deal with Nike.
Or about what a backup point guard would make.
Exactly. Yeah. What he's probably making in a couple days now. I believe that was announced with the catchphrase to start Hello World. Is that right?
Hello World. That's right. So thank you. So I said Goodbye World. The sunsetting.
Goodbye World.
Yeah.
So what are we? The some of the backdrop here. Nike in 2016 announced that it was getting out of the golf hard goods business. So no longer making balls, no longer making clubs, no longer making putters, things like that. Continued to focus on golf apparel and golf shoes. And Tiger obviously stayed relevant in that world. But even that business, a very small part of Nike's multi-billion-dollar business, they had been scaling back the number of golfers that they were working with. I guess my first question to you, Scott, this is not a surprise, even though it's such an indelible partnership. But what are we to make about the separation of Tiger and Nike?
Yeah, what are we to make of it? Boy, I guess the question is that what we'd said right away is I don't want to look back. All right, we know what it was. I mean, he was the greatest on the planet, and marketers did what marketers do. That's great. But I am really interested to see what happens with Tiger moving forward.
Yeah.
How do you utilize Tiger? Is it his own brand? Does he do a Federer thing like a sub-brand of On? He still has TaylorMade. Does he do sort of a sub-brand of TaylorMade? Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. When Tiger's not playing, and if it's not Sunday and it's not the leaderboard, and if the gallery isn't swelling, and I mean, I'm trying to think of my live Tiger experiences. I had Tiger at Shinnecock for a U.S. Open, and I forgot, but I remember I went to cover it because it was like the Glory Group. It was a foursome of top elite, and I don't remember who it was, but I remember early, I believe it was the first round, Tiger hit out of the weeds and sprained his wrist or something and pulled out of the tournament. I'm like, okay, nothing for me to do there. I saw him at Torrey Pines when he was playing on one leg and went the overtime there.
Yeah, with
and I followed Tiger in the round of the Masters. I did this with Mike Buteau, our former colleague. Followed Tiger at the Masters for a column when he came back from the controversy, which was its own experience in its right. Now I can look back. Now I need to look forward. How do you extract the value of the once great Tiger no longer playing, dominating? I'm not sure. What do you think he does next? This to me is the interesting conversation for me is what now with Tiger Woods?
Yeah, I think that it's obviously clear that Tiger Woods is going to have value to brands for as long as he's alive.
Course
right?
design.
This is the way that golfers and tennis particularly operate. I would argue in some ways, Scott, that I think Tiger's value to an apparel company kind of diminishes. I see Tiger with Rolex, a longtime partner of his. I understand that. I can see him with Buick or a car company. But the apparel side of things, I actually think is maybe not the real bread and butter for him when he's no longer consistently playing on Sundays or Saturdays or even Fridays. But I think Roger Federer is the perfect example. Roger Federer, also a longtime Nike athlete, towards the end of his career as a dominant athlete, separated from Nike. You mentioned it. He has a big, some people say $300 million plus deal with On shoes. It includes some equity. He's very involved in the company, but he's getting paid handsomely for it. He also has another deal with Uniqlo on the non-shoe apparel side, another multi-$100 million deal. That to me is the example to look at.
But you're putting the Tiger
Nike
brand
athlete
alongside Federer. Do you see them as the same in sort of like when I think of Roger, I think it's elegance. I think it's refinement. It's the Wimbledon whites. That's to me, and that makes sense with Rolex and these things you're talking about. I don't see that with Tiger. Tiger was raw power. It was greatness and power, yes, but it wasn't that refinement. I don't see that for him. So that's why I'm not sure where we place him. Okay,
I do. I mean, I get.
You could be wrong twice in one podcast. That's fine.
I get that Buick is not Mercedes, right? And you can maybe make.
Well, he had the deal with Buick.
Had to deal with Buick, yeah. And I could see him being a valuable car endorser for a long time.
I'd rather see him with Tesla.
Also, maybe possible.
Yeah.
Who knows? Tiger is fascinating because keeping the comparison, Roger Federer was essentially scandal-free for his dominant athletic career, and Tiger Woods has been very, very far from scandal-free in his career, and outside of the very big one a decade ago, more recently has had some challenges off the course.
What was he driving in the car crash day? Was that a Genesis? Is that what he was driving? Was it a Genesis?
When the recent car accident, when he mangled his leg, I believe it was a Genesis.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's going to be interesting to see. The world, I think, is his oyster here, right? I can't imagine Adidas swoops him up. So I think you're looking at either something he's going to start himself apparel wise, or maybe a smaller company, maybe a golf focused company that can give him a bunch of equity. Maybe it is an upstart like On or something like that. It's going to be interesting because I agree with you. I think the really, really powerful days of Tiger Woods as an apparel endorser, I think, are over. That doesn't mean he doesn't have value now, but it's going to be fascinating to see who wants that value and how he chooses to extract it moving forward.
Could you do something with his son? How about Tiger and Charlie together?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'd like to see.
Do you think LeBron is probably having these conversations? LeBron is also a Nike athlete. I believe he has one of those quote unquote lifetime deals that are not actually lifetime deals, but yeah, of course if you're if you're looking ahead and you're in the golf business, I think you have a good idea that Charlie Woods could be a prominent member of this sport for a very long time, in addition to his father. Just like you look at basketball and think that LeBron and his sons could be in a very similar boat.
Am I to guess that Nike owns the TW trademark? What do you think?
I think probably yes. I think they did own the Roger Federer trademark, that RF, without the lines. Yep. But who knows? Maybe Tiger has a different thing. The relationship, I'm sure the relationship between Nike and Roger Federer was good even when it ended. Yeah. The relationship between Nike and Tiger, from what I understand, is very, very strong. Yeah. Phil Knight has a lot of respect for Tiger. They have been very close for decades and decades. I don't think that this is an animus breakup in any situation, and I would not be shocked if they are willing to work with each other in the future on things like that might have value for one and not the other.
Right. There is only one proper answer for the standout moment of the Tiger Woods Nike relationship. Give me. You know what it was?
Was it that ball that hung on the edge?
That's the one, man. You couldn't pay $1 billion to buy something so good. That is
the logo out.
An indelible moment. The logo is clear as can be, and just drops into the hole. and fist pump the whole thing.
And for added context for folks who are curious, even though he's not playing that much golf right now, in 2022, Tiger Woods was the 10th highest earning athlete in the world, according to Sportico and our colleague Kurt Badenhausen. 65 million, vast majority of that was off-field earnings, of course. But even as his career sunsets to a degree, he is still a very powerful endorser, not just with Nike, but with a lot of the companies that he works with.
All right, so who you got? UW and Go Blue Michigan. What do you got here? What are we talking about?
Man.
No matter who wins, no matter who's around, ESPN is a major player in the world. I still love, you were so early to this years ago. I remember when you were like, you guys understand that like ESPN virtually owns college football.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Not
people
just
still
all
don't
the-
realize it. You can
not
write it
just
100
all the-
times. People do not realize that ESPN virtually owns college football.
Yeah, and people think, they broadcast a lot of the games, which is true, but they also sell a lot of the sponsorships.
They sell the
They have
sponsorship,
a
yep.
very big relationship with the college football playoff, and we talked to Bill Hancock about this. He was a little cagey with some details, but they're out there in the market looking for new partners. There's a lot of pressure to expand beyond ESPN for the reasons that you're talking about, Scott. I think everyone realizes they'd rather have multiple groups in a lot of power as opposed to a single
That
media
consolidation
company
of
that does all
power
of
ain't
this.
good.
And we'll see if that ends up happening. But I love the college football championship game because it is the event probably where ESPN does the most in terms of trying new things, doing the X's and O's broadcast with the coaches and the influencer broadcast, and Pat McAfee, who we can get into.
We'll get to McAfee
quite
in a
month.
minute.
He'll be on the sidelines for the game with his own.
Will he be on the
stream.
sideline for good?
We'll
A little
see.
foreshadow tease. Ta-ta.
But I do think that every year this game is an interesting look at the way that ESPN is thinking about the potential future of big sports broadcasts. So
Yeah, and-
whoever wins tonight or yesterday, depending on when you're listening to this, it's a good moment in sports media because it does show where I think the future may hold.
Shame on us, though. We actually had a good segue to the game, and I blew it because we were talking about Nike. Like, how many straight Nike teams have won the college football championship, right?
It's been since Auburn, I think.
Right. It's
Maybe
been
I'm wrong
20-something
about that, but-
years, and, Washington is an Adidas school. So we could have a change here at the top.
I believe this is the first Adidas school to make a college football playoff.
Good investment by Adidas.
Championship. Yeah, I think, unless I'm forgetting one of them, I believe when Cam Newton won with Auburn, that was the last non-Nike school, I believe, to win the national title in football. But yeah, it's been a dominant run, and that industry, just like golf in some ways, has changed dramatically. The kind of the bubble that we saw in 2016 and 2017.
Under Armour raced in to give it
Under
UCLA
Armour
and some of the
crushing.
others, and then they had to end those deals. Yeah.
And even the Washington Adidas deal. Right?
Yeah.
Adidas was a longtime sponsor of UCLA. They lost UCLA to a huge Under Armour deal. A lot of companies like Adidas and Under Armour think about this regionally. If you lose your big West Coast college sports power, where are you going to go to fill that hole if you're
Wait,
Adidas?
aren't those teams based in the southeast of the United States, or maybe some in the middle of the country in the Big Ten? What do you mean? What is this?
Very good.
What is
Yeah.
this West Coast you speak of, Mr. Novi Williams? I'm not familiar with that.
That's good.
Well, are you talking about
That's good.
Washington State? No, Washington's playing in the game, not Washington State.
Yeah, that's right next to Tuscaloosa, from what I understand.
Exactly.
Yeah, so in some ways, the Washington Adidas deal is a direct result of that era when schools all wanted big time schools in their portfolio, companies did, and wanted them geographically, and there was not that much power out on the West Coast for college sports. So Adidas looked at and gave a huge contract to Washington. I would imagine Washington's next deal might not be as big. Who knows? But it's a really interesting apparel matchup with some backstory on the business side as well.
National championship game versus Apple Cup winning T-shirt. I'm not, it's not really sure where they're getting their value, but I think they did okay on that deal. And I don't want to give you too much credit because I do bathe you in credit, but I don't know if it was your byline or not. But the story about the championship teams, Michigan and Washington, and how much debt their athletic departments have, was that you or is that not you?
Lev did the writing, came from our database.
Okay, yes. I just find it fascinating that they're both top eight in debt.
They're
right?
both top 8 in public schools in debt, both in the $200 to $250 million
Better keep
range.
selling out those games, folks.
Yeah, it's interesting. The list is actually really fascinating because number one, we've talked about it a lot, is Cal, and Cal is joining the ACC, but in a bunch of trouble, I think, financially. If you're on that list and you're not in the Big Ten or the SEC in 2 years, trouble. There are some.
Cal
big
could call on
red
its
alarms.
endowment. The endowment could write a check if it wanted to.
That's been true for the past decade, and they have kind of bailed out the athletic department, but not in a way that really easily right-sizes things.
I remember years ago I wrote a story, Eben, when I got one of these alumni emails that said, hey, at Syracuse University, that I think 5% the student fee was going up or something, and like 5% was going to be directed to athletics. And I was like, that's interesting. So I, started poking around, and I realized it was like the first time in forever, whatever, that the university had to subsidize athletics with fees from, just sort of your student fee. And at Syracuse, there was always a saying, your student fee at work, when you went to a computer lab, when you went to the gym, you'd see a little sign like, oh, look at these new computers, your student fee at work.
Yeah.
Well, now it went to the athletic department, and it was the first time. And we actually wrote the story. I don't think they were too happy with me. But it's interesting to see if you're going to take on this kind of debt. There is something called debt service. You have to pay this debt down. It's one of the reasons I think Stanford, when they announced they were doing a construction project on their stadium, counterintuitive, they didn't make it bigger. Michigan will just keep making bigger. You want 105, 110, 120,000 seats? They said, no, we're going to make it smaller. You go big. The one problem with making it bigger, things may be great right now, but you always have to fill those seats. That's what debt service does to you.
And looking at this top 10, the schools that are not going to be in the SEC or Big Ten in the next few years, Cal at number 1, $440 million of debt. Yeah. Arizona State, number 2, they'll be in the Big 12, $319 million of debt. And the only other one on this list is Georgia Tech at $270
I can solve their problems, Evan.
Of debt.
I can solve the problems.
Okay.
Very easily.
Private equity?
No. Who needs private equity? All I will do is say, I'm going to set up a volleyball court in the middle of the football stadium and invite Nebraska to come play. And I will also
do that 100 times.
Do 100 times and then 50 times. Because
the
other 50 times, I'm going to set up a basketball court and invite Iowa and Caitlyn Clark to come play.
There you go.
Because, by the way,
I was on this list as well.
I did the little. Oh, they really? I was on the list? All right, well, they need more Caitlyn outdoors. I was at the New Jersey Devils game the other day where Connor Bedard got hurt. Shame.
You're the bad luck.
But that was Phenom Friday, where I asked people on Twitter, if you just had free tickets and free time, are you going to Prudential Center to see Connor Bedard, as I did, or are you going down to Piscataway, to the RAC, the Rutgers Athletic Center, to see Caitlyn Clark in town? And I want to say I'm surprised, but I'm not really surprised that it wasn't a runaway, but more people said Caitlyn Clark. And let's just say I met a few people, and I'm not going to say who they were, but I did meet a few people who did both. They went to Caitlyn Clark early, stayed for the game, and then raced over to Prudential Center
were
for
there
the
kids
second
involved
half.
In that, or were those adults that were just curious?
There were kids involved in this. Yeah. And the kid I talked to, who, by the way, not young kid, like this, probably mid-teenager, was glowing. Got a high five from Caitlyn in the warm-up line, with good seats, and just absolutely mouth agape at getting to see Caitlyn Clark and getting a little high five.
Here's the thing that surprises me about that poll: asking people what they would rather see: Caitlyn Clark playing with Iowa, or seeing Connor Bedard in the NHL. Caitlyn Clark is not theoretically at the highest level of women's basketball. Next year, she will be playing for a WNBA team, probably somewhere. And if that were the case, if you were to ask that question, seeing Caitlyn Clark playing for the Liberty or seeing Connor Bedard, I think you maybe get a very different answer.
Should you say Indiana, because don't they have the number 1 pick?
Indiana, sure. I just don't know what the team's name is.
I think it's the Fever.
The Fever, okay. So I bet in a year, if Connor Bedard is playing the Devils and the Indiana Fever are playing the Liberty on the same day, and you were to ask that question, I think Connor Bedard performs better. And there's no other. I can't think of another sport out there where that's necessarily true. If this was Connor Bedard playing in the AHL or whatever it was, you would expect more people to be excited about him when he was in the NHL. But women's basketball, for a lot of reasons we've talked about before, about the power of university brands and all that. Yeah. College women's basketball is a much bigger commercial entity than the WNBA in a lot of ways. And it's the reason why there's a chance that Caitlyn Clark will be taking a pay cut next year when she goes into the WNBA, as opposed to what she's making right now in NIL money, et cetera, as a member of the Iowa women's basketball team. But I was not surprised that the end result was that Caitlyn Clark was a bigger draw.
And there's scarcity. She only makes one visit to
100%. Right? Yeah, but I do think that it is interesting that I do believe that once she's playing at the next level higher up, I think some of that interest starts to wane.
All right, not going to disagree. And we're jumping around a little bit. We were talking on ESPN earlier, but you mentioned McAfee, and I sort of foreshadowed, will he be sidelined permanently? Man, I got to tell you, from what I know at ESPN, it's not easy to survive when you've taken a public shot at one of the top executives, And there was a story in the New York Post about the ratings of McAfee's show, and he came out and just squarely put the crosshair on Norby Williamson, saying that he leaked this stuff and he's trying to sabotage the show by name. Like, it wasn't like he was hinting.
Right?
Yeah, I was like, whoa, this is not the intern you're taking shots at, right? This is sort of the masthead of ESPN. I was extremely surprised we didn't hear anything else, of it after that. But clearly, inside ESPN, there must be much consternation as to, is this worth it? Are we getting what we bargained for? Is the ROI there?
One of the questions that you always love to ask, and I'll turn it around to you. Who needs who more in this scenario? Does ESPN need Pat McAfee, who runs essentially is their afternoon primetime slot, is the face of ESPN on television on weekday afternoons? Does ESPN need Pat McAfee more, or does Pat McAfee, who is popular in his own right, need ESPN more?
Let my retort include another question. Do you believe that the McAfee core audience is of just sort of a fixed size? 'Tis what it is. Do you think that ESPN is bringing new fans to Pat McAfee? Is he going to get much more? And I think the whole purpose is where the answer was no, that his core audience is what his core audience is. So I don't think McAfee became the kind of entity ESPN wanted without ESPN, obviously. So he does not need ESPN. And he's proven himself sort of on the alt cast, that there's a sizable audience for him there too, that his loyal followers will go follow and watch him there. So I will say ESPN needs a McAfee-esque character, one that perhaps works better within the confines and limitations, as we saw with Barstool and regulation and what is permissible with Penn and Barstool. So I'm going to say ESPN needs a something more than Pat McAfee needs ESPN.
Yeah, it's interesting because he's obviously, he's not my cup of tea, he's not your cup of tea, but he's obviously extremely popular.
Yeah.
And finding a Pat McAfee style replacement, I think, is probably, maybe even impossible, but is
very difficult.
Is very, very, very difficult. He clearly has his finger on that intersection of sports fandom.
Let me ask you this. If I may. Because as a player, there aren't a whole lot of people, unless you really, really, really follow, who's your punter on your fantasy team, right? He was a punter for the Colts. Like, whatever, who cares? Dime a dozen, right?
Yeah.
So, all right, but he became, because he had that credibility as a player, great. It's almost the same thing with Biz Nasty, right?
Yeah.
He was not a well-known hockey player, but
Paul
he's
Bissonnette,
Paul Bissonnette. He's probably become, would you say, the most influential voice in hockey?
Media? Yeah, certainly
yeah,
one of them.
Media.
He's on TNT's crew now.
He's the guy. He's got the podcast, obviously, Spit and Chicklets. My son loves the show. He wears the gear. It's become almost like hockey in itself is a lifestyle, but they've managed to make that brand a lifestyle brand as well. So there's that. So I would just say, is there just somebody else we don't know about? Like, I'm guessing, is somebody going to pop up? Who's that guy? Like, Barkley was a star, and he does it for TNT. But there are others. We're seeing Pat Beverly. Is there somebody else that's out there who can do this? We just do not know who that person is yet.
It's interesting that all the names you mentioned, McAfee and Pat Beverly included, are all Barstool origins, right?
Like you just said, it's not your cup of tea, it's not my cup of tea, but there's a huge audience. Yeah,
and I am a big Spit and Chicklets listener.
Me too. I think it's a great show. I love bringing the culture of hockey out to the masses.
Agreed. Yeah, it's in the question of who needs who more. Yeah, I'm kind of torn. If Pat were to announce tomorrow that he was just moving to YouTube TV or just going to stream his show on Twitch or YouTube, his audience goes down significantly, right? That seems fairly clear. How valuable is the audience that he's losing in that transition?
And what happens if he loses Aaron Rodgers?
What happens if he loses Aaron Rodgers? ESPN the show is paying Aaron Rodgers to appear, obviously, and Aaron probably doesn't do that so consistently if he's not being paid. I think there's some open questions here, but Pat has bounced around a lot. He was not at Barstool very long. He was not at FanDuel very long. Controversy has come to him at ESPN after not very long.
We're not going to say the name, but you and I met with a what do we want to call that person we met with in McAfee? A coworker, a what?
Someone who's familiar with his business, for sure. Yeah.
Someone very familiar with his business who early on said, this is not going to last. Like, this is just not going to last.
Yeah, and maybe that is just the way that Pat's career goes, or maybe at some point he does kind of strike out on his own. It's interesting that as popular as he is, he's probably the candidate maybe most suited for doing his own thing, but he has obviously not chosen to do that yet. Maybe that's a point in the on the side of traditional linear media that even someone with this avid digital following who's willing to bounce around to find him is still choosing to do it through bigger legacy media companies. But it will be fascinating to see after so blatantly and vocally calling out a single high-ranking executive who is one of the highest-ranking executives at ESPN. The fact that Pat was not, he did apologize. He put a shirt on with sleeves, which people were laughing about. But Pat did apologize.
That's formal wear
to a degree. But yeah, the fact that his show was not taken down off the air, there doesn't seem to be any, at least, public discipline for him or his show.
No one-day suspension, nothing.
No one-day suspension. I think that does speak a lot of volumes about where the power lies, at least right now, in that relationship.
All right. Speaking of platforms that would shrink one's audience, and this would run counter to everything we've heard from the commissioner of the National Football League, where it's about reach and breadth. Are you aware that there is a playoff game that will be exclusive? Allow me to use that word again. Exclusive to Peacock. If you want to see the Miami Dolphins roll into Kansas City and play the Chiefs, better be watching on Peacock. That's the only way to do it.
Yeah, I heard about this from all my Swiftie fans, Scott, who were incensed that they were not going to be able to watch.
How many Swiftie fans are there? How many of those are there?
A lot, yeah. A very large amount. This is a fascinating one.
Wouldn't it be great if they had like millions of signups just for the game?
I mean, they are going to have maybe not millions, but I at some point I would love to know, and maybe Peacock will release these numbers. But what the actual what this leads to in terms of people signing up and whether they're getting the monthly subscription if they're signing up for bigger things. That's the whole goal here, right? This is the NBC Peacock. They're paying the NFL $110 million for this game, I think, and hoping that via some sort of awareness, signing up for monthly plans, which I think are $6, or yearly plans, which I think are $60. Some combination of all those things is gonna net out as a positive in the end. And we could talk about the choice of game, right? We're kind of joking about Taylor Swift, but
I'm not joking about Taylor Swift. I think part of it.
Yeah, no, I think there were options about which game was going to be the Peacock game, and only one of the games that were options had a global mega pop star as part of the storyline woven into it, and it's not. It doesn't seem crazy to me.
Got a high profile team, high profile quarterback.
Put a finger on the scales a little bit.
I think you're right. Are you going to watch it?
No, probably not.
Neither am I. I would far before Roger. Don't hate me. I would encourage folks to utilize that time to do anything else. Just try. Take a break. Take a break from the crack, step away from the screen, try life. Try one little slice of life without an NFL game in front of you. Just try.
And I do have Peacock, by the way, because my partner watches Vanderpump. So there's it's not.
So
it's
you
not
have
even,
access
it's not
to
even
it.
the
And
financial
thing.
I'm just probably not gonna watch it. But I am very curious to see how many people do, for sure.
All right, we'll close it out with Josh Harris going a bit unconventional here, rolling in with Bob Myers to oversee sort of a picking of a new football executive to lead the Commanders. Obviously, Bob was the architect of the Golden State Warriors. They had some success, as far as I'm aware, during his tenure there.
Just some, yeah.
Yeah, I love, and you know this, I love folks who do things unconventionally and don't just say, well, this is how it's always been done. So I love you don't need to be a football executive to figure out what would be or who would be a good person to coach this team. This is about character. It's about culture. And I love the fact that Josh was, and Blitz and Mitch Rails and Magic, that they're just going a little unconventional. Let's see. Clearly something ails this team. Let's see what a guy who has a track record of success building one of the premier franchises in sports in general, global sports. Let's see what he can do. Give him a shot.
And no sport, I think, stands to learn that lesson more than the NFL, right?
Yes.
Which so consistently seems to rely on the football guy as
But
the,
you
as
you
the
know how
thing
much
to
I hate
hire.
that.
Agreed.
That's why I love Tony Dungy. I've always, I love the whole calm, doesn't have to be screaming at people approach. There's more than way to get it done, but like the screaming, vein popping from the neck, football coach smacking on the helmets. I'm like, it doesn't have to be that way. But the commitment has to be there from the top. I am a big believer. Like I watched, years ago. Jerry Sloan getting to some NBA finals, but never quite being able to beat Michael Jordan, and he had Malone and Stockton, whatever. But it was clear that Jerry was the guy, and he had the backing of ownership. Like, you just knew. Like, didn't they trade Darren Williams to the Nets in like 10 seconds after he complained? Like, ownership made it clear, the coach ain't going anywhere. It's going to be you. And you get that sort of in San Antonio with Popovich. I guess Belichick had it for some time there, but you better empower guys. It does absolutely start from the top, and I think that's part of the culture that you have to create right there. The players have to know that whoever this person is has the back. Coaches, executives, that they have the back. Didn't LeBron? Remember the LeBron bumping Eric Spoelstra when he left the floor one time during a game, and like it was pretty. The message came back really clear. Like, Spoelstra's not going anywhere. Like, that's my guy. Mm-hmm. So, Mickey Arison established that culture as well. I think all the really good franchises do that.
This is also one of those areas in which in the NFL having a new, very rich owner matters, right? The NFL is not Major League Baseball, where Steve Cohen can buy the Mets and suddenly pay $200 million more a year and put a much better team on the field. The NFL has a hard salary cap.
Theoretically
much better.
Theoretically.
Yeah. The NFL has a hard salary cap. There are restrictions in how much a new owner, even if he's worth, or collectively the group is worth $50 billion as the Commanders group is.
Say David Tepper?
Yeah, David Tepper's learning this lesson also. But one of the things you can do is all these other things. Bob Myers does not come cheap, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. And as we said, a lot of traditional NFL owners might not even think to hire Bob Myers as someone to run their team.
I don't even know who Bob Myers is.
Josh Harris is both willing to spend that money and is also kind of aware of ways in which maybe thinking outside the box is better. It made me think a little bit about the Walton family and the Penners who bought the Broncos, who obviously, again, were not able to spend immediately to put a great team on the field. But one of the things they did do, I believe at the end of last year, their first year in ownership, when players were complaining about the turf, the last game of the season, they paid whatever it was, $1 million, $2 million to put a brand new grass field in. Just for one single game before the season ended. Those are the kind of things that do turn heads in the league. It's the kind of thing that players notice. It's the kind of thing that executives notice when Bob Myers takes over for a group like the Commanders. These are the things that a multi-billion-dollar owner can do outside of signing a better free agent or paying someone more money that actually do maybe affect the success of your franchise.
I've seen, having walked the bowels of many stadiums and arenas, you see the family room, where wives and kids and friends and whatever hang out. It's a big deal. Like, do you offer like daycare, or do you offer things like that? That stuff matters to players. That's the culture that we're talking about. Do players walk in and be like, "This is where I want to. This is where I want to be"?
And for folks,
and they talk.
Yeah. If people are curious about that exact topic, a few months ago, Eric Jackson, one of the days that you were out, Scott, joined me on this show to talk about, he did a big story about Josh Harris's first 100 days. And one of the things that he found was that so much of the original changes were stuff exactly what you're talking about, Scott. Mm-hmm. It was a hospitality tent in the parking lot for players and their families. It was an extra,
the old players.
Yeah, bringing back old players. It was an extra hot tub in the locker room, or it was a scoreboard on the practice facility so that the coaches had a better sense of timing. It was a lot of little things that maybe a lot of fans don't think about, but go a really long way when it comes to a new owner putting his or her stamp on a new organization. And I think Josh Harris has done a lot of that already.
I was toying with the idea of teeing up the Eddie Murphy hot tub song. But do you know that one?
I don't know the hot tub song.
Oh, my God, we're going to have such a great laugh when we're done taping and we go outside. you really don't know that? And I'm not a huge Saturday Night Live guy, but you don't know Eddie Murphy, the hot tub?
I don't.
Oh, this is going to be really
Okay. Well, then
friend of the program, Steve Horowitz, right now is putting face palm to hand, going, "Oh, Eben, oh, Eben."
Well, with that, I'm excited to wrap this up. He is
End
Scott
it. Go
Soshnick.
see it.
You can find him on Twitter at Soshnick. I am Eben Novi Williams. You can find me on Twitter at Novi_Williams. The show is produced by Aaron Greenewald.
Give it
Thank
up,
you
at
very
Eben.
much
Give it
to
up.
Aaron.
Let our
Sportico's
Eben have
digital
it.
media editor, Cora
At
Beltman.
Eben,
would like
I'm
you to know
talking
that
to
can
you.
Follow the show at Sporticast, which is the hub of the Sportico Media Network.